Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Mehta. I'm the CEO of a company called Mansueto Ventures. We publish Fast Company and Inc. magazines, and I'm delighted to moderate today's panel on preparing for the next pandemic. As you know, roughly one human pathogen emerges every year, and any one of those novel pathogens could have the potential to be the next pandemic. Today, we're going to explore the question of how the public and private sectors can work together to protect lives and livelihoods. There's already some interesting examples of public-private partnership just happening today. Comic Relief US announced a $10 million pledge to the Global Fund, which is the first private organization to announce a commitment to the Global Fund's 7th replenishment. The World Economic Forum continues to support a number of global public-private partnerships, including the pathogen surveillance initiatives. And there's so many other conversations happening here at the World Economic Forum that point to the importance of public-private partnerships, and we're going to explore a little bit of that on the panel today. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will have a little bit of time at the end for audience Q&A, so please use Slido, the Slido app, in order to submit your questions, and I'll see them here on my iPad. And if you are going to use social media, if you're going to tweet or mention this panel, please include the hashtag WEF22. So with that, let me introduce our panelists. Helen E. Clark is Board Chair, Partnership for Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health for the World Health Organization, and she's also the co-chair of the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Responsiveness. We also have with us, we're very fortunate to have President Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda, followed by Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as the author of a new book about preventing the next pandemic. We're followed by France D'Souza, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Illumina, Inc., and finally, Peter Sands, who is the Executive Director of the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
I want to start with Bill Gates. Your new book is titled How to Prevent the Next Pandemic, but this panel is about preparing for the next pandemic. So is the next pandemic really preventable?
Well, the ideal is that when you have outbreaks, that you detect them early and you contain them before they go global. Less than 2% of the deaths are in the first 100 days. And infectious disease is an exponential phenomena. And so if you let it run, then it's very difficult to rein it back in. The true exemplars, the variance between the death rates in countries with similar GDPs is quite dramatic. You have almost, a factor of 50 between the good performers and the poor performers, where sadly the US is in that poor performer category. And there's clear things that they did. If those were done early around the outbreak, then you could prevent it from spreading to lots and lots of countries. So that certainly should be the goal, is to not let it go global.
And we'll explore some of those very specific things that countries and institutions can do to help prevent the next pandemic. President Kagame, let me ask you, what do you see as the top lessons that we've learned about preparing for the next pandemic from dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic?
To begin with, we have to act as if there is going to be a pandemic sooner or later anyway. So we get prepared for that, either to prevent it or stop it spreading, as Bill has just said. But what we have learned, for example, from the perspective of our continent, we have to deal with capacity issues to begin with. We have to have the capacity to test, to treat, to administer vaccines, and so on and so forth. That is number one. Number two, the lessons we learned also show us that we have to avoid to always be dependent on others for things that our lives depend on. So that's why we seek to build manufacturing capacities for vaccines, like is beginning to happen in different parts of our continent. The third would be, if you look at across the continent, we have to, again, work together. We have to put our resources, in which case, continentally, we have the CDC, the African CDC. We also have the African Medicines Agency, and we have to build in their capacity to help all the countries of our continent, 55 countries. The other, I should say, we need really to focus. There is a lot in science and research and technology that we should be able to tap into to deal with all these crises. So we should make investments either in individual countries or again continentally, and that's what we have been doing and seeking to do.
Helen, your independent panel released a report in May of this year, and the title was Transforming or Tinkering? Inaction lays the groundwork for another pandemic, which is very sobering and very blunt. Can you talk a little bit about what is preventing private players and governments from taking the steps that you laid out in your initial reports?
So in the initial report, we observed that there'd been previously around 16 different reports, reviews, and commissions on this subject, most of which had never been acted on at all, which is part of the reason why we keep issuing progress and update reports to remind people that there is a good set of recommendations out there. But I think there's always a danger in this area that it falls victim to that cycle of panic and neglect. So we've had panic, right? But the reality is that political resolve to fight COVID is waning. Popular support for measures is waning. You know, people are over COVID. The problem is it's not done with us, but we're in danger of losing